I think this one's going to be fun. Are these fairies real? You already know the answer. Of course not. Now, how exactly did you know that? Your gut said fake. It was quick, certain, satisfying, but that wasn't your intelligence speaking. It was your network. Nobody you trust has told you that these are real. No expert has signed off. No magazine has run a story. And if they had, your gut might very well say something different. In 1917, 2 Yorkshire girls were photographing paper fairies pinned to a tree, and the man who created Sherlock Holmes, the patron saint of evidence-based reasoning, looked at those photos and called them proof. Today I'll show you exactly how that happened and why the same machinery could work on you tomorrow. Hi, I'm Scott Knoll of DreamForge. Let's engage. Here's the photograph. 1917, Cottingley Beck, Yorkshire. Francis Griffiths was 9 years old. 4 fairies are dancing, allegedly. Now look at it, really look. The wings are flat, the poses are stiff, they could be, and in fact they were, paper cutouts traced from a children's book and held up with hatpins. This man saw that photograph and called it evidence. Who was he? Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. He was a trained physician, knighted by the crown, creator of literature's most rational character, the man who put the words, "When you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth," into the mouth of Sherlock Holmes. He didn't just believe the photographs. He wrote a Strand Magazine article promoting them, then a 200-page book. Self-funded. He defended them publicly until the day he died. And here's the question I want to sit with for the next 8 minutes. How does that guy end up here? Because the easy answer, he was stupid, is obviously wrong. The real answer is uncomfortable, because the real answer is also about all of us. Before Doyle ever saw those photographs, they had already passed through a chain of hands that made them feel authenticated. And that chain is the part of the story that matters. It's the part that matters most, because the chain is still here. It's in your phone. The girl's mother, Polly Wright, was a member of the Bradford Theosophical Society, a group interested in spiritualism, mysticism, and the unseen. She showed the photographs at a meeting they passed to a man named Edward Gardner, who was a prominent theosophist. Gardner sent them to a photographic technician named Harold Snelling, who examined them and pronounced them, and this is the exact phrase, genuine single exposure photographs. That sentence was technically accurate. The plates hadn't been double printed. The negatives hadn't been retouched. As a statement about photographic mechanics, Snelling was absolutely right. But by the time that sentence reached Doyle, the qualifier had quietly evaporated. Genuine photographs had become genuine fairies. A narrow technical observation about emulsion and exposure had been launched into proof of the supernatural. This is the kind of thing I'd rather have an expert break down. So let's bring in Def. Def, walk me through a circular validation. How does something like that actually work, and how did it work in this case?
Circular validation runs in 3 steps, Scott. 1. A claim circulates inside a community that already wants it to be true. 2. Someone within that community, usually with technical credentials, is asked to evaluate it. 3. Their conclusion gets repackaged as independent expert verification, even though the expert was never independent of the community. Snelling fits the pattern exactly. He moved in spiritualist circles. Gardner, also a theosophist, sent him the plates. Snelling examined them and confirmed they were genuine single-exposure photographs. That was a true statement. But it was a narrow one. He was certifying the mechanics of the photograph, not the contents. By the time the certification reached Doyle, genuine photograph had become genuine fairies. A technical observation had been laundered into proof of the supernatural. It's the same architecture that authenticated cold fusion in 1989, Piltdown Man for 40 years, and, I would estimate, most of what trended on your feed before noon.
Thanks, Def. That makes sense. So, that's how the photographs reached Doyle, pre-validated. But that only explains why he took them seriously. It doesn't explain what happened next, which is that Doyle stopped behaving like a doctor, stopped behaving like the man who invented Sherlock Holmes, and started behaving like a publicist. December 1920, the Strand Magazine, the same magazine that had serialized Sherlock Holmes for 30 years, publishes Fairies Photographed, written by Doyle himself. Circulation of the magazine skyrockets. 2 years later, The Coming of the Fairies, 200 pages, self-funded, a defense of the Cottingley photographs and a survey of fairy lore. And here's where it gets interesting. Critics had pointed out, reasonably, immediately, that the fairies' wings looked flat, that their poses were borrowed from contemporary children's book illustrations, that there was no motion blur, despite the fairies appearing to dance. Doyle's response wasn't to engage, it was to reframe. Critics were prejudiced. Critics were closed-minded. Critics couldn't see what was right in front of them. He brought in additional experts, but only ones already sympathetic to spiritualism. He arranged for the girls to receive new cameras, and they produced 3 more photographs, and he took those as confirmation. Every piece of contradictory evidence became, in his framing, more proof of how badly people needed to disbelieve. This is what motivated reasoning looks like in a brilliant person. It's not stupidity, it's precision in the wrong direction. The same intellect that could construct Sherlock Holmes could also construct an airtight defense of paper cutouts given enough motivation. Every one of us is capable of the same move. The question isn't whether your brain does this, it's when and about what. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but those photos are 100 years old. We have AI now, deepfakes, generated video. The problem is so much bigger than what fooled some Edwardians. And I get it, but I think that gets the story exactly backwards. The Cottingley photographs didn't succeed because the forgery was good. The forgery was bad. The wings are flat. The fairies are clearly traced. Anyone looking at those photos with fresh eyes, the way you looked at the fairy footage at the start of this video, would see paper and hatpins. They succeeded because of everything that happened around the photograph. The trusted network, the circular validation, the brilliant man who needed them to be real. The technology was never the variable. The technology was the cheapest part. Replace those photographs with today's equivalent, an AI-generated video, a manipulated audio clip, a screenshot of a thing somebody never said, and the architecture around it is identical. The vulnerability isn't the technology. It was never the technology. The vulnerability is us, specifically us when we want something to be true. And that's when your defenses are lowest. Not because you're stupid, because you're human. And the same hopeful machinery that lets your brain imagine better futures, the same machinery that lets you fall in love, commit to a project, believe in your kids, is the machinery this trick exploits. Here's the good news, and it's bigger than it sounds. Knowing how the trick works is the only real protection we have, and that protection scales. It travels person to person, generation to generation. Every kid who learns this lesson is a little harder to fool. Every adult who notices their own wanting gets a small upgrade in their epistemic immune system. That's not naive optimism. That's earned optimism. The future is going to be full of better fakes. Of course it is. The technology gets cheaper every year, and the incentives to deploy it keep growing. But the future is also full of people who can see them, people who pause when something feels too good to be true, people who ask, who profits if I believe this? Whose validation am I trusting? And how independent are they really? People who notice the moment they want something to be true and treat that wanting as a signal to slow down, not speed up, those are the people we need. That's a future worth working toward. And it starts with knowing the architecture of the trick, which you do now. And you knew, just like that. But here's the thing. So far, I've talked about Doyle as the fooled one, as if this story were about being smart enough not to fall for things. And that's not the most interesting part of this story. The most interesting part is why a doctor, a knight, a man trained in evidence-based medicine needed those fairies to be real, and why 2 ordinary children invented them in the first place. That's where we'll go next time, because once you understand the trick, the next question is the harder one. What was the trick meeting? What need was it meeting? What hunger in him, in them, in us? If you want that next part when it goes live, subscribe and you won't miss it. And if you love speculative fiction where hope and big ideas win out over darkness, that's what we do at DreamForge Magazine. The link is in the description. I'm Scott Knoll. Thanks for engaging, and I'll see you out there.